My name is Shirley, and I never thought I would get caught up in a family drama that would change my life forever. At 31, I was living a pretty normal life in the city. For the last 6 years, I worked as a secretary at Global Tech, a large company downtown. The job wasn't exciting, but it paid the bills for my small rented apartment. On weekends, I would escape by going to dance classes, losing myself in the music and forgetting about the stack of paperwork waiting for me on Monday. It wasn't much, but it was my life, and I was okay with it. Family, though, was a different story. I had a younger sister, Olivia, who had always been the favorite. From the moment she was born, our mom treated her like she was the most special thing in the world. Dad just went along with whatever mom wanted. It was always about Olivia. I tried not to feel bitter, but it was hard not to feel like I was invisible in my own family. As the years passed, the gap between us grew wider. We didn't talk on the phone as much, and visits became even rarer. I would see pictures on social media of family events that I was invited to, with Olivia always in the center, smiling with her parents. It hurt, but I told myself that focusing on my own life was better. That's why I nearly dropped my phone when I saw Mom's number on my screen one Thursday evening. I hesitated before answering, preparing myself for whatever drama might be on the other end. "Shirley, it's your mother." Her voice crackled through the speaker. "Hi, Mom," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. "Is everything okay?" "Your father wants to see you," she said, getting straight to the point. "Can you come to the house this weekend? Monday at 4 p.m., don't be late." And with that, she hung up. I stared at my phone, feeling a mix of emotions inside me. What could be so important that Dad wanted to see me after all this time? Part of me wanted to ignore the invitation to protect myself from the disappointment I knew was coming, but curiosity got the better of me. I decided to go, if only to find out what was happening. As I stood outside my parents' expensive home that Monday, I took a deep breath. The house looked just the same as always, a symbol of my parents' success, and a reminder of the life I never quite fit into. I rang the doorbell, half expecting no one to answer, and half hoping no one would. The door opened, and there stood my mother, her face showing polite indifference. "You're here," she said, stepping aside to let me in. Everyone was in the living room. My father sat there, looking pale and tired. My sister Olivia and her husband Kevin were also there. The room was filled with tension, with unspoken words and hidden motives hanging in the air. I sat on the edge of an armchair, feeling like a stranger in my own family home. Up close, I noticed how old Dad looked. His skin was pale, almost see-through, and his eyes seemed sunken. A chill ran down my spine as I realized this wasn't just a regular family gathering. "I've got something to tell you all," Dad began, his eyes sweeping across the room. "I'm terminally ill. The doctors say I don't have much time left." The words hit me like a punch in the gut. I gasped, tears filling my eyes. Despite the strained relationship we had, I loved my father, and the thought of losing him was unbearable. "Daddy," I choked out, reaching for his hand. He squeezed mine weakly, a sad smile on his face. Olivia let out a loud sob, burying her face in her husband's shoulder. Mom sat there, expressionless, her lips pressed into a thin line. I wondered how long they had known, and how long they had kept this from me. "There's more," Dad said, his voice getting stronger. "I've made some decisions about my will." The room went silent. Even Olivia's sobs quieted as everyone leaned in to listen. "Lauren," Dad said, looking at Mom, "you get the apartment in the city." Mom nodded, as if she expected this. "Olivia, the house will be yours." Olivia's eyes lit up, a smile breaking through her tears. Then Dad turned to me, and I saw a determination in his eyes that I'd never seen before. "Shirley," he said, "I've decided to leave you my savings, all of it. $600,000. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. $600,000? It was more money than I had ever imagined having, but more than that, it felt like he was finally acknowledging me, a way of making up for years of being overlooked. The silence that followed was heavy, and then all hell broke loose. Olivia jumped to her feet, her face twisted with anger. "Dad, that's not fair. Shirley's barely part of this family anymore. She doesn't deserve it." Mom glared at me, as if I had somehow planned this. "Samuel, you need to cut her out of the will now," she hissed. I sat there, shocked, as my mother and sister attacked me with their words. Then Dad slammed his fist on the coffee table, the sound echoing through the room. "Enough," he shouted, his face red with anger. "This is my decision, and I won't change it." He turned to Mom, his eyes burning with intensity. "Lauren, I've been under your control for too long. I've neglected Shirley because of you, and it stops now." The room fell silent again. I looked at my father, seeing him in a new light. For the first time, he was standing up for me. Dad turned to me, his anger softening into sadness. "Shirley, can you ever forgive me? I've been a terrible father to you." Tears streamed down my face as I moved toward him, wrapping my arms around his frail body. "I forgive you, Dad," I whispered. "I love you." We held each other for a long time, years of pain and misunderstanding melting away. When we finally let go, Dad looked exhausted. "I need to rest now," he said, slowly getting to his feet. "Shirley, thank you for coming." As Dad left the room, the atmosphere changed. Mom stepped forward, her face filled with barely hidden fury. "Listen here, Shirley. You need to do the right thing and give up your share of the inheritance." "No," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "I won't give it up. Dad wants me to have it, and I'm going to respect his wishes." Olivia's face twisted with anger as she stepped closer, jabbing her finger at my chest. "You'll regret this, Shirley. Mark my words." Over the next 3 weeks, my phone buzzed constantly with messages from Mom and Olivia, each one demanding that I give up the inheritance. Their tone grew more hostile and threatening with each message. I ignored them all, focusing on my work and my dance classes, trying to find some sense of normalcy. Then, on a gray Thursday morning, I got the call I had been dreading. Dad had passed away in his sleep. The funeral was a blur of black clothes and somber faces. Mom and Olivia put on a show of grief, wailing dramatically and clutching each other. I noticed Olivia wearing a ridiculously expensive necklace and bracelet, the diamonds catching the light as she dabbed at her dry eyes. After the service, we gathered at the house. I watched with disgust as Olivia made a big show of removing her jewelry and carefully tucking it into her purse. As the last guests left, I started gathering my things, eager to get away. That's when everything went wrong. "My jewelry," Olivia screamed, her hands flying to her face in fake shock. "It's gone. Someone stole it." Mom's eyes locked onto me, full of accusation. "Well, isn't it convenient that the only person here all day is the one who stands to gain so much?" I felt the blood drain from my face as I realized what they were doing. They were setting me up. "You can't be serious," I stammered. "I didn't take anything." Olivia's husband stepped forward, his voice dripping with fake concern. "Then you won't mind showing us what's in your purse, right, Shirley?" I clutched my bag tighter, my mind racing. I knew I was innocent, but I had a bad feeling that wouldn't matter. "No," I said firmly. "I don't have to prove anything to you." Olivia's husband pulled out his phone. "Then you leave me no choice. I'm calling the police." As he dialed, I saw a triumphant smirk flash across Olivia's face. In that moment, I realized just how far they were willing to go to get what they wanted. I stood frozen, my heart pounding, as 4 officers entered the house. Olivia immediately started a tearful story about her stolen jewelry, playing the part of the grieving daughter who had been victimized on the day of her father's funeral. "Officers," Olivia's husband said, his voice thick with fake concern, "we have reason to believe Shirley may have taken the jewelry. She's refusing to show us what's in her purse." The older officer turned to me, his face unreadable. "Ma'am, would you mind opening your purse for us?" I felt trapped, knowing that whatever happened next wouldn't end well for me. With shaking hands, I opened my purse. The officer looked inside, and his expression hardened. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to come with us," he said, pulling out Olivia's necklace and bracelet from my purse. The world seemed to spin. "This is impossible," I stammered. "I didn't take these. I'm being set up." But my protests were ignored. Mom and Olivia started shouting, calling me a thief and a liar, hurling insults that cut deeper than any knife. As the officers led me out, I caught a glimpse of Olivia's smug smile hidden behind her hand as she pretended to cry. At the police station, I sat in a cold, bare interrogation room, still wearing my funeral clothes, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Hours passed, and then the door opened. To my surprise, it wasn't a police officer who walked in, but my mother. She waved off the officer standing guard, insisting she speak to me alone. As soon as the door closed behind her, Mom's attitude changed completely. The grieving widow was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating woman I hardly recognized. "Listen carefully, Shirley," she hissed, leaning in close. "You have one chance to fix this mess. Give up the inheritance, sign it over to Olivia, and all of this will go away, the charges, the scandal, everything." I stared at her, disbelief mixing with a growing sense of betrayal. "You set me up? Your own daughter?" Mom's laugh was harsh and without any warmth. "Oh, please. You stopped being part of this family a long time ago. Now you have a choice. Give up the money, or we'll make sure you go to prison. Think about it, Shirley. A thief who stole from her own sister at their father's funeral, your reputation will be ruined. You'll lose everything." I felt sick to my stomach as the full weight of their betrayal hit me. "No," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I won't do it. I didn't steal anything, and I won't let you blackmail me." Mom's eyes flashed with anger. "You ungrateful little rat," she spat. "I hope you enjoy prison. Everyone will know what you did stealing from your own family. You'll be nothing but a criminal, a disgrace." With that, she turned and slammed the door behind her. I sat there, stunned, as tears streamed down my face. The reality of my situation began to sink in. Later that night, I was released on bail, stumbling out of the police station into the cool night air. My phone buzzed with a message from my boss at Global Tech. My stomach dropped as I read it. "Shirley, I've heard some disturbing rumors. Until the situation is resolved, I think it's best you take some time off, paid leave, of course. I believe in your innocence, but we need to protect the company's reputation. Take care." I leaned against the cold brick wall of the station, feeling my world crumbling around me. In just one day, I had lost my father, been betrayed by my family, arrested, and now I was on the verge of losing my job. The next morning, I woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. With trembling fingers, I searched online for private investigators nearby. One name caught my attention: Paul Mescal, a former police detective turned private investigator, known for solving tough cases. I made the call, my voice steadier than I expected as I explained my situation. "Miss Daniel," Paul said after I finished, "this is a delicate situation. Family conspiracies are hard to prove, but if what you're saying is true, we'll find evidence. It won't be cheap, though." I thought about the inheritance I was fighting for. Money's not an issue. I need to clear my name and expose what they've done. The last weeks were a blur of secret meetings with Paul, anxious waiting, and sleepless nights. I threw myself into my dance classes on weekends, desperate for any distraction from the constant worry. My phone stayed silent, no calls from work, no more threats from my family. The silence was almost worse than the conflict. Then, one rainy afternoon, my phone rang. It was Paul. "Shirley," he said, his voice serious, "I've got news, but you're not going to like it." My heart sank. "What is it, Paul?"
He sighed.
"I've been following your mother and sister, trying to catch them talking about the inheritance or the theft, but they're careful, too careful. They never discuss it in public, and I can't legally bug their homes." I felt the last bit of hope fading. "So that's it? There's nothing we can do?" "Not exactly," Paul replied, a hint of hesitation in his voice. "I did find something, but it's not directly related to your case. It's about your sister." I sat up straighter. "What about her?" "She's having an affair, Shirley. I have photos of her going into a hotel with a young man, definitely not her husband. I also recorded some of their conversations, and let's just say they're not flattering to her husband." For a moment, I sat in stunned silence. Then, slowly, a plan began to form in my mind. "Paul," I said, my voice low and determined, I need you to send me everything you have on this, and I mean everything." As soon as I hung up, I sprang into action. I spent the next hour going through the photos and recordings Paul sent, my mind racing with possibilities. Finally, I made a decision. I picked the most incriminating photo, my sister entering the hotel with her young lover, and sent it to her husband's phone with a simple message. "Interested in knowing what happened next? Meet me at Alfred Coffee tomorrow at 4 p.m. The next day, I arrived at the cafe early, my nerves on edge. At exactly 4 p.m., Olivia's husband walked in, his face a mix of barely contained anger and curiosity. "What's this about, Shirley?" he demanded as he sat down across from me. I took a deep breath. "I think you already know, Kevin. But what you've seen is just the beginning." Over the next hour, I laid out everything. I had the photos, the recordings of Olivia laughing at Kevin, mocking his performance in bed, and discussing her plans to leave him once she got the full inheritance. Kevin sat in stunned silence, his face growing paler with each revelation. When I finished, he looked up at me, his eyes blazing with a mix of pain and anger. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice hoarse. I leaned forward. "I want justice, Kevin, and I think you do too. Help me prove that they framed me, and we can both get what we deserve." A few days after my meeting with Kevin, my phone buzzed with a message from him. It contained several audio files. My heart raced as I pressed play on the first one. Olivia's voice filled the air. "Can you believe how easy it was to plant that jewelry in Shirley's purse?" My mother's laughter followed. "I know." The look on her face when the police found it was priceless. "Well, she'll have no choice but to give it up now." I listened to file after file, each one filled with their cold plotting and cruel laughter. A mix of vindication and disgust washed over me. Finally, I had the proof I needed. The day of the will reading arrived quickly. I entered the notary's office with my stomach in knots, but my resolve firm. Mom and Olivia were already there, giving me smug looks. Kevin sat quietly in the corner, giving me a small nod. The notary, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, cleared his throat. "Let us begin," he said, unfolding the document before him. He read through the will, detailing the distribution of assets just as Dad had explained that day at the house. As he finished, I stood up. "If I may," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "there's something I need to address before we conclude." Mom's eyes lit up, and she nodded approvingly. "I'm glad you finally came to your senses, Shirley. I knew you'd make the right decision and give up the inheritance." Mom and Olivia exchanged triumphant glances, their faces beaming with anticipation. But I was about to disappoint them. "I'm afraid you've misunderstood," I said, pulling out my phone. "I think you'll all want to hear this." I pressed play, and the room filled with their voices, gleefully discussing how they had framed me for theft. As the recording played, I watched the color drain from their faces. Olivia let out a choked gasp while Mom sat stiff, her lips pressed into a thin line. When it ended, chaos erupted. "You lying scum," Olivia screeched, lunging toward me. "How dare you?" Mom hissed, her composure cracking. "You ungrateful, scheming." I recorded those conversations. Kevin suddenly spoke up, his voice cutting through the commotion. The room descended into madness. Olivia was screaming at Kevin, Mom was hurling insults at me, and I stood there, watching it all unfold. Silence. The notary's voice boomed, startling us all into quiet. "This is a legal proceeding, not a circus. Everyone will calm down this instant, or I'll have you all removed." As the notary's words echoed through the room, a heavy silence fell. It was broken by Kevin, who stood up abruptly, his face a mask of barely contained fury. "Since we're airing dirty laundry," he said, his voice trembling with anger, "I have something to add." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a photograph, slapping it down on the table in front of Olivia. Olivia's face went pale as she stared at the image. It showed her entering a hotel with a man who was definitely not her husband. "I know everything, Olivia," Kevin spat. "Your affair, your lies, all of it. I'm filing for divorce, and thanks to our prenup, you won't see a penny. In fact, you'll be paying me compensation for your infidelity." Olivia's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, no words coming out. Mom looked between Olivia and Kevin, her expression a mix of shock and dawning horror as she realized their carefully constructed world was falling apart. Suddenly, the door to the notary's office swung open, and 4 police officers walked in, their faces stern. "Lauren and Olivia Daniel?" one of them asked, though it was clear he already knew who they were. Mom and Olivia looked up, tears streaking their faces. "You're under arrest for false accusations of theft and attempted blackmail," the officer continued. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." As the police read them their rights and handcuffed them, I watched with a mix of satisfaction and sadness. This was justice, but it also marked the final end of our family relationship. I walked out of the office behind the police, watching as they placed Mom and Olivia into separate patrol cars. As the sirens faded into the distance, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It was finally over. Taking out my phone, I dialed a familiar number. Shirley, my boss's voice came through, sounding concerned. "Is everything all right?" "Better than all right," I replied, a smile in my voice. "I can explain everything now. The accusations against me were false, and I have proof." I gave him a quick rundown of what had happened. As I finished, I heard him let out a low whistle. "Shirley, I'm so sorry you had to go through all that," he said, genuine sympathy in his voice. "But I'm glad the truth came out. Listen, your job is still here whenever you're ready to come back. In fact, I'd be delighted to see you at work as soon as you feel up to it." The weeks following the confrontation at the notary's office were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and life-changing decisions. As the truth came to light, the charges against me were quickly dropped. The relief I felt was indescribable, like a heavy burden I had been carrying for months was suddenly lifted. But for Mom and Olivia, the nightmare was just beginning. They faced charges of false accusation and attempted blackmail. The trial was swift and damning, with the recorded evidence leaving no room for doubt. In the end, they were found guilty on all counts. The judge, a stern-faced woman with piercing eyes, looked down at them from her bench. In addition to the criminal penalties, this court orders Lauren and Olivia Daniel to pay substantial damages to Shirley Daniel for emotional distress and damage to her reputation. The fine was staggering. Mom's face went pale as the amount was read out, while Olivia burst into tears. In the days that followed, I watched from a distance as their lives fell apart. Mom, with no other choice, was forced to sell the apartment Dad had left her. It was a beautiful place in the heart of the city, but now it slipped from her grasp, the proceeds going straight to me as part of the damages. Olivia's situation was even more dire. The house she had been so proud of inheriting had to be sold to cover her part of the fine. I couldn't help but feel a small sense of satisfaction as I remembered Olivia's smug face the day Dad announced his will. But Olivia's troubles didn't stop there. True to his word, Kevin filed for divorce and demanded the compensation outlined in their prenuptial agreement for her infidelity. What little money was left from the sale of the house went straight to him. In just a few short months, Mom and Olivia lost everything: their comfortable lives, their social standing, their financial security. All of it was gone. They were left with nothing but the consequences of their own actions. As for me, I found myself in a position I'd never imagined. With the inheritance from Dad and the damages from Mom and Olivia, I had more money than I knew what to do with. After much thought, I decided to buy a beautiful apartment in a quiet part of town. It was everything I had ever wanted in a home: spacious, bright, and most importantly, it was mine. The rest of the money I invested carefully. I spent hours researching, consulting with financial advisors, and making smart decisions. My goal was to ensure a steady income for years to come, to build the security I had always longed for. As I stood in my new apartment, looking out over the city skyline, I reflected on the turbulent journey that had brought me here: the pain, the betrayal, the fight for justice. It had all led to this moment. I thought of Mom and Olivia, now struggling to make ends meet. Part of me felt sorry for them, but a larger part knew they were facing the consequences of their own choices. They had tried to take everything from me, and in the end, they lost it all themselves. My phone buzzed with a message from my boss, confirming my return to work next week. I smiled, looking forward to getting back to normal, or rather, my new normal.